Hi everyone, welcome to episode number 14 of our Procurement and Sourcing series. In this episode, we will deep dive into the fundamental definitions and capabilities within purchase orders in Microsoft Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation. With that note, let's quickly jump into today's topic. So let's quickly get into today's topic of purchase orders in Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation. So first of all, before getting into the topic, I just want to set the context that if you are a fresher and if you are a beginner in Dynamics 365 and you are getting hands-on with the purchase order functionality in Dynamics 365, this is your go-to episode. But you are already well versed with the topic of purchase orders and you just want to brush up on the topics and the fundamental definitions, then I will recommend you to watch this episode full. But otherwise, if you are already working on the purchase orders, do not spend much time on this video because you can directly go ahead to the next video where I will talk about the other capabilities within purchase orders. So in this episode, I will just completely cover about the basics with respect to purchase orders so that especially the freshers or the new functional consultants or the end users will get hands-on about the capabilities of purchase orders. That's the whole idea about this. So I just want to set the context of this episode. So first of all, what is a purchase order? A purchase order is a document that represents an agreement with a vendor to buy goods or service. It can be a physical inventory or a service which you are doing with your vendor, and represents an agreement. It's not a journal. There are basically three different types of purchase orders which can be created in Dynamics 365. So whenever a order document is created in the system, it's an agreement by which you are making a commitment to buy certain goods or services from the vendor. So that's the whole idea of generating purchase orders in the system. And while creating the purchase order, there can be three different types of documents which you can create. One is journal, another one is purchase order, another is the return order. Journal is basically a draft copy, does not affect stock quantities, inventory transactions, and master scheduling. So purchase order journals are not used for any of your stock or inventory related transactions. So if you want to make an entry in the system and if you want to store a record in the system just for your viewing purpose, then I will recommend you to use the type called journal. Otherwise, always it is recommended to go for the type called purchase orders. And of course, you can configure the type which you want the users to use in the procurement and sourcing parameters. The second type is a purchase order. Like I said earlier, orders need to be confirmed with the vendor. This is where you follow the process of source to pay or procure to pay, where you procure the goods from the vendors and then receive it, can invoice it and pay the vendor. So if you are going to follow those processes, then purchase order is the type which you need to select. And the third type is the return orders, where if you have any defective goods or wrong receipt or short receipt with which you want to process the return with the return to the vendor, then the third type, returned vendor transaction, need to be followed. We will also see as we progress in this procurement and sourcing series how to process the return orders. So that is a separate business process flow altogether for that. And the first most important aspect as far as when we discuss about the purchase order or the various statuses within the purchase orders, and by fundamentally we need to be clear on all the three statuses before getting into the system. So first status is the purchase order status, next is the document status, and the third one is the approval status. Approval status comes into picture only when you enable change management, by which the workflow processes comes into picture, where a manager or the purchasing in charge need to get the approval before processing the purchase order with the vendor. So first is the definition we need to, but the fundamental definition of the each and every status is we need to understand. What is a PO status? The status of the quantities on the order. So each and every line has a definite quantity for which the status is captured in the system. So based on the status of the line, the PO status is updated. It can be open order if the lines have not been received. Once it received, the line level status becomes received, invoiced, or if the line is cancelled, then the quantity at the line level is made by zero, or you're not receiving it anymore, then the or line level status gets updated as cancelled. So this is purely based on the quantities of the order. That is purchase order status. Second one is the document status, the status of the most recent document. So what we mean by the most recent document status is, so in a purchase order there can be hundreds of transaction line items. So it can be based on the purchase inquiry or purchase order or product receipt or invoice. So what is the recent document level status for the all underlines what we have in the purchase orders? What is the recent document? So we will quickly see this in the D365 screen so that you are able to understand what is the recent document status. And then we have the approval status. Most of the users who are already using it must be aware of this, where if we have enabled the change management, then by default the purchase order comes to the status of draft, and then you need to submit it for review. Then it becomes in review, and once it is approved or rejected, quickly we will see in the next screen a process flow chart on how the various statuses of draft, in review, approved, confirmed, or interlinked with each other, right? So also, first of all, we need to understand what is the difference definition or description of the respective approval status, which is very important, because I will also touch upon PO status and document status as we get into the D365 screen. But you need to know the fundamental definition of using approval statuses in Dynamics 365. So draft is a which is used when the purchase order hasn't been submitted for approval in PO workflow. So only when workflow is used and change management activated, only in those cases you can see the draft status. Otherwise, generally the purchase order by default it will be in the status of approved. It will be in interview when the purchase order is submitted for the approval. Let's say I am a purchasing agent and I need to create a purchase order and get my approval from my purchasing manager. In those cases, I create the purchase orders and then I submit it for workflow so that it goes for the review with my purchasing manager. And then once it is approved by my purchasing manager, it now changes to the status of approved. Once it is approved, then only as a user, the purchasing agent, I can go and confirm the purchase orders. Then once I confirm the purchase orders, it's a confirmed agreement to procure material from the specified vendor account to the respective site and warehouse. And once the purchase order is finalized, the PO was made final. The PO is financially closed, which means the inventory transactions are financially updated and no longer changes can be made. So we'll also see how the financial transactions gets updated when the goods are physically received, when the goods are physically updated, all these things in the D365 screen. The one important aspect which I want to touch upon here is the request for change is enabled whenever if you want to make any changes when your workflow is in process. It is possible only when it is in the status of approved or confirmed. Neither in rejected nor or in the finalized stage you will be able to do a request change. So which is very important, and most users try to do a request change when the workflow is rejected or finalized, which is not possible. So I just want to make it clear at this point in time. So let's get into the Dynamics 365 screen. So first of all, for creating a purchase order, all you have to do is go to all procurement and sourcing, then purchase order, all purchase orders. First, it opens up a purchase order inquiry page where you will be able to view all the previously created purchase orders along with the vendor account and the invoice account. And also here you can see the purchase type, which we discussed which we just discussed before. And then you also have the approval status and the purchase order status. So this is what we were discussing. So purchase order status is actually showing based on the status of the quantities on the order lines. So that's what the status which shows over here. And approval status is the status which is based on the workflow and the change management which is enabled for the respective purchase orders. So this is just an inquiry for users to have a quick view of what are the purchase orders which are previously generated, what is the state, and how to create a new purchase order. All you have to click on new, and then once you click on new, then select the vendor account for whom you need to create a purchase order. Select the vendor account, and then once you select the vendor account, you need to select the under the general tab, you need to select the site and warehouse, in which particular site and warehouse you actually want the material to be received. Select the specific site and warehouse. In this case, let me select any site and warehouse. So I will also, as we progress in the series, actually already I made a series with respect to advanced warehouse management processes. In that I have clearly explained what is the difference between a site and warehouse, how do we configure it. Please do check out the particular playlist if you are not sure what is the difference between site and warehouse. And purchase type, by default it has picked purchase order, and this primarily comes from the procurement and sourcing parameter. So here you can also free to change the respective purchase type, whether if you want to process a written order or if you want to process a journal, just make a selection accordingly. But let me also show you where to configure this. If you go to procurement and sourcing module and setup under procurement and sourcing parameters, you have the option under general section to select the purchase type. So this becomes a default value. So let's say if I make it as a journal and then save it, so by default whenever any user creates a purchase order, the purchase order is created as a type journal instead of purchase orders. So based on your organization specific requirements, you can decide on it. So now you can see the purchase type is journal. So let me select the warehouse, but let me change this type to purchase order. And then in the purchase agreement episode, we already saw how to tag a purchase agreement. This buyer group, order, requester, or primarily order and purchase order pool, these are used for the reporting purposes. If you want, very well, you can capture those. So let me click on OK. So this will create a purchase order in the system. So this is a purchase order entry in the system. Let's try to understand about this form so that any user who comes to this page will be able to, because if you are new to the system, then it is not easy for you to understand this form. First, let's try to understand this form before getting into the details. So any purchase order form, if you open, it consists of a line section and a header section. On the top, this is called the action pane. And if you go to header section, there are multiple FOSS tabs which are available. Let me collapse all. If you right click and then click on collapse all the FOSS tabs are collapsed right now. And at any point in time, you can right click and then expand all so that you can view all the FOSS tabs which are available in the header section. Let me collapse all. So these are the FOSS tabs which are available at the header level, and these specific details, whatever you capture it at the header, applies to all the lines available in the line section. And you can also modify those details at the line level also. It's a similar data you will find at the line level also. For example, if you go to general tab, you can define the site and warehouse. So in D365, the beauty of creating the purchase orders is using the same header level site and warehouse, you can have multiple purchase order lines with the different site and warehouse also, which is possible. So a separate transaction line gets created for each and every line entries. So let me go to the line section also. Let me also show you. So if I enter an item number, the user, whatever the item you want to create a purchase order, you need to capture the item number. And for each and every item, you can see there is a separate list of line level details which are available over here. So these are line specific and this is header specific. Header applies to all the lines in the purchase order. And even if you want to have line specific details, then you can also have it at the line detail section. So how do we add multiple lines? So for example, here I have clicked on add line. User can click on add line. You can also remove the line. If you click on remove, the line will be removed. Even if you want to click on add lines, then primarily what happens is it generates a query based system using which you will be able to add, looking at the stock, what are the list of lines you want to add it into the purchase order. So let me click on OK. So this displays all the item numbers with the available physical quantity in the inventory. So I can add the purchase quantity, and then once the items are added, then I can add all those lines into the add line section. Let's say for this item, let me put the quantity as 10, and then let me click on apply. Then let me click on create. So like this, if you want to look at the available physical quantity and then make the purchase order line entries, then that is also possible in Dynamics 365. So right now what we did is we have added a line. You can also add the line by using the add product section. This by default opens up the procurement catalog. So it opens all the catalogs for say. So you can also decide which particular hierarchy you want to use, from the procurement catalog or sales hierarchy or retail product category. We already discussed about how to configure the procurement category hierarchy and procurement product catalog. Please do check out the same. And also here, from here, if you want, you can select the item and then just simply click on add, and then it adds the quantity over here. You can give the quantity also and then click on OK. So by this way also you can add the line items. And I think this item is not added. Okay, the color must be filled, and so the color is because it contains a variant. So this is also a option to add the line items. So if you give the appropriate variants, then from using the category also, category hierarchy also, you will be able to add the items. So this is from a retail product category. So I think if you go to procurement office supplies, yeah, this is the item. Let's say if I want to add, I think this does not have, this already have a variant to it. So let me give the quantity as 2, click on OK. So this has added the item, so that's great. So this is also the way of adding, so these are all the multiple ways of adding lines to your purchase order lines. So let me go back to the PowerPoint presentation. So now this is a flowchart which I want to primarily discuss with you. So there are probably the two flows. If the change management is enabled, that takes us to the process of processing the purchase orders through workflow approval. And if the change management is not enabled, then it traditionally takes us to the process of processing it without the approval. So in that case, a purchase order will be created. It will be by default in the approved state. Let me go back to the Dynamics 365 screen. So here you can see by default the status. Once I created the purchase order, it is in the status of approved. It's not in the status of draft. You can see that once the purchase order is created, it can be either in the status of draft or it can be in the status of approved. So right now, so I'm kind of going back and forth between D365 and presentation so that you are able to get the overall idea of it. So right now it is in the status of approved, because if I go to in the header section and then in the setup, you can see that activate change management, we have not enabled it. You can also enable it when we actually create a purchase order. If we click on new, um, let me move the video. So you can see here also I can enable this, but you need to make sure that it is enabled in the parameter or at the vendor master level. Otherwise you will not be able to activate the change management. So if you go to procurement and sourcing parameters, in the general section, you need to make sure that activate change management is enabled, and also you need to make sure the appropriate workflow is configured, without which you will not be able to submit the purchase order for workflow. So let me open the purchase order which we created, 127. So the idea is, first of all, once the purchase order is created, either it can be in the status of draft or it can be in the status of approved. So once if the purchase order is in the status of approved, so this means the purchase order is already approved for submitting, for conforming to the purchase order for procuring those item or service. So in those cases, the user can directly go ahead and confirm the purchase orders. But if the status is in draft, then as a purchasing agent, he or she need to submit it for the approval. And then the status of the purchase order will be in review. And then once the purchasing manager approves it, it change to approved. If it is rejected, then that goes back to rejected status, or it will be changed to draft again. So if the overall idea is only in the case of approved, you will be able to take the purchase order to the confirmed. If it is rejected or in the draft, you will not be able to confirm the purchase orders. You need to make sure that always the status of the purchase order is approved before it can be confirmed. And once if it is confirmed at that point, or even if it is approved, you will be able to go for a request change if it is set change management enabled purchase orders. In those cases, if you want to make any changes, it once again takes the purchase order back to the status of draft, and then you have to make those changes and then submit it for review. Once your managers reviews it, once again it goes back to approved state, and then it will be confirmed. So you can follow this cycle as per your request for any changes or any modifications which need to be done in the purchase orders. And once it is confirmed, then only the purchase order is actually eligible for receiving any material. So even if it is an approved or draft or in review stage, you will not be able to receive any of the materials or items or service, but you need to make sure that the purchase order is in the confirmed state. Then you can receive it. Once the item is received, then you can do partial receipt or partial invoicing. That is also completely possible in Dynamics 365. And once the item is invoiced and you want to finalize the purchase order to make sure that there are no further transactions happens in the purchase order, you need to take it to the status of finalized, so that the item is financially updated. So when the item is received, it is physically updated. When it is invoiced, it is financially updated. So I will also make a series explaining about what is the difference between a financial and a physical update, how the transactional entries are posted in the journal and the vouchers are created. But all you need to know is, first of all, when the items are received, it is physically updated in the stock, and once it is invoiced, it is financially updated in the stock. And you can at that point in time, you can definitely take this to the finalized state. So this is the overall process flow for the purchase order. So right now in this episode, we are going to create the process flow for what we have kept it in the box. We have actually already taken the purchase order to the approved state. So now what I'm going to do is I need to go to the action pane. At the purchase tab, we have actions called confirm. So you can directly confirm it, or if you want, you can generate a confirmation where it takes us to a screen to print the confirmation if you want to print the confirmation. Otherwise, I will strongly recommend you to go ahead directly with confirming the purchase order from the screen. So once the yeah, I think now the purchase order is confirmed. Now you can see the purchase order is in the status of confirmed from approved. So the purchase order got created and it was not in draft, it was directly in approved state because we have not enabled the change management. And then right now we have confirmed it with the 2 purchase order lines. Now once if it is confirmed, then we need to go ahead and receive the material. Let's say vendor has processed the order and they have dispatched the material to us to our premises. Now all you have to do is in the action pane, go to receive section and click on product receipt. So you can generate the product receipt. You can also parameterize the what product receipt you want to, whether you want to pick the ordered quantity, then it picks the quantity which we have actually ordered, or you can also go for a registered quantity or receive now quantity. Receive now quantity primarily comes from the order lines. So if you go back, so let's say, so here we have not given the receive now quantity. So here by default, what is the quantity you want the users to receive at any point in time? So if you have entered it already in the receive now section, let me save this. So now let me go to product receipt. Let me change. You can see the quantity with which we want to do the receipt is 10 and 2. So let me change it to receive now. So now it has automatically changed to 5 and 2, and the delivery reminder for this particular line is 5. So this is a section which shows the delivery reminder which is pending to be received. So you can, first of all, you need to mandatorily capture the product receipt number. I will just capture today's date. So a product receipt number is the one which you got as a reference from your vendor. So which will be received by your warehouse. It can be a reference number for any future references, and this number will be stored in your product receipt journal also. So and then what we have is, so you can also process the registration. So I'm not sure whether we can touch upon that in this episode. No problem, let's go ahead and touch upon that. I'm sure this video is getting bit longer than expected. So if you want to complete the registration, all you have to do is in this particular line, go to select the appropriate line. Once if it is active, for that particular active line, you will be able to do the registration process. Registration process is where you will be able to add multiple lines. Just select the line and then click on add registration line. So here right now for this particular item, only site and warehouse are the active dimensions. Otherwise you will be able to see the location, inventory status, license plate, or whatever the dimensions which are applicable, like batch number, serial number. If you want to get it automatically generated, all those will be available over here. So let's say if I want to register 2 quantity, and then I need to confirm registration. So which now takes 2 quantity in the status of registered, and the balance 8 quantity is in the status of order. So for some reason, if I have wrongly registered this particular quantity, then once again I need to add the line with the registered status. Now you can see the register now quantity is automatically created with a negative sign, and I just don't need to do anything. Just simply click on confirm registration. It takes us back the 2 quantity to the order status. So this is the way of quickly unregister and register the quantity whenever you want, if you have wrongly registered the lines. So let me register 5 quantity. Let me confirm it. Let me save it and go back. So now if I select the registered quantity, so here the option is to select the registered quantity, the system will show me only the registered quantity which is already registered in the system. So this is a quick way to do a product receipt for the respective quantities, like receive now, order quantity, or if you want to do based on the product receipt quantity, then that is also possible. And the last one is primarily used only for the items and services, sorry, the items which are of type services. So you can parameterize this. So you need to capture the product receipt number, the quantity, and then click on OK. So this will process the product receipt journal. So once the product receipt journal is posted, you will be able to view it over here in the journal section, where you can view all the list of product receipt journals which are posted in the system. So which is the way by which you will be able to view what are the lines. So for example, in the receive, if I go to product receipt, I will be able to view all the lines which are posted against that particular receipt. So from this page, we'll also be able to correct or cancel the product receipt, but we will see this in the next episode, not in this episode, because we are right now trying to do the first flow of create, approved, confirm. Now we have received it. Now the next step is to be invoiced. So all we have to do is go to invoice, click on invoice. So let's say the supplier has delivered the material along with the invoice, and under the invoice section, so let me, I think this is taking time. I'll suggest you to forward the video, but okay, now you need to provide the invoice number. Let it be, I'm just giving a reference number, and then you can also provide an invoice date on which this invoice got generated. And then you can also see the match status is not performed, so you can update the match status. What primarily happens when we update the match status is the system tries to do a matching of the receipt quantity, that can be a two-way matching or a three-way matching, along with the amount of invoice which you're primarily trying to do, so that if there is a two-way match, then both of these quantities are matched, and if it is a three-way match, then your order quantity along with that this match happens. So probably maybe in our accounts payable series we will discuss in detail about this. Once this match status is performed, then you can see from the match status will be passed. So if the match status is not passed, then you will not be able to post the invoice. Let me go back to the screen. So in the overall flow, what we are seeing right now is the invoice status. So the line will be invoiced only when we perform the match, so that whether based on the company policy, it can be a two-way matching or the three-way matching. Do not worry about the topic of two-way matching and three-way matching right now. The whole idea is you need to perform the match, update the match status, then only you will be able to post the invoice. So I think there is a issue with the connectivity. So now you can see the match status is updated to passed. Now you'll be able to go ahead and post this invoice. So once the invoice is posted, then the quantity is financially updated in the system. So this is actually processing posting of this purchase invoice. So I think there is a slight delay. So once the purchase order is received, then make sure that you post the invoice so that you will be able to make the payment to the vendors. So if it is not posted, then you will not be able to make the payment to the vendors, right? So now this item, now we have successfully received two quantity. If you go to receipt, you can also see the product receipt journal, the lines. So we have successfully received 5 quantity. And then also if you want to check the invoice, if you go to invoice section under invoice journals, you can also see for the 5 quantity. If you go to the line sections, we have also made a invoice for 5 quantity, right? So also on the other way, if you also go to general section, if you check the line quantity, this is a easier way to view all the statuses, like invoice, how much is invoice, how many quantity is delivery reminder, how many is received, how many is registered. So you can get a overall idea of all the lines for which a purchase order got created. So you can also check this out in the line quantity, right? So that brings us to the end of this episode. So overall, we have kind of covered the basics of how to create a purchase order, what are the different statuses in the simple process flow of taking the purchase order from the approved to confirmed, received, and invoiced. So in the next upcoming episode, we will discuss some of the important topics related to purchase orders, purchase inquiry, and also we will cover some of the topics like registration process we already covered in this episode. We'll talk about product receipt reversal, request change, line and multi-line discounts, return order processing. And most importantly, I also want to cover a scenario called under and over delivery, which is often used across many organizations. So thanks for watching this video. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel D365 Talks, and I will see you soon in episode number 15 with a lot more interesting topics and capabilities within purchase orders in Microsoft Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation. Sriram Sivashankaran signing off.